everybody. Welcome back to the next few steps in the Doug Lico Churchill block. You can see there's two of them up there on my board right now. Stephanie's got her Christmas themed one behind her as well. And today we're going to we're going to do two steps. We're going to do step 2 and step 3, which are relatively easy, but we're going to give you some tips about how to line up because these involve triangles onto squares. We're going to give you some tips, how Stephanie does it and how I'm doing it. But before we begin, we want to discuss something that has been frustrating us about this pattern, which we didn't think was going to be any kind of problem when we looked at this. Yeah. For me, I've never done a Doug Lico pattern before, but everybody says good things about them. Say, they're well written and they are well illustrated. And they are. I mean, this book is any example. Yes, they are. But somehow my pieces are, in some cases, out by 1/8 of an inch. And you'd say, well, that's not a major. Well, it is for two reasons. One, if you're out by 1/8 of an inch on one of the early pieces, that's going to compound as you move through. And the other problem is this particular block has a lot of points, and you don't want to cut off your points. So if you trim too close, you're going to lose your points. Okay. Ask me how I know. Because in those two that are up there, I think there's one on each one of those blocks that the points a little bit cut off, but I'm not going to sweat it. So we have some advice for you if you're getting frustrated with it. Doug Lico in this pattern puts measurements for each unit. Don't ignore those. Check every piece you sew together to make sure you have exactly what he says you should have. And trim accordingly. And like I said, with the 1/8 of an inch, to me, well, yeah, it says it's 7.5. Mine is 7.5 and a little teeny bit. No, make sure you trim it to fit in, because later on that'll come around to bite you in the rear end.
Yeah, that little bit. Yep.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, I am finding this block tedious. Okay, but I'm doing it. I'm going to do it. And when in doubt, fudge. Okay, yeah. You might have to. I have had to sort of very gently tug on my pieces just to get them so I can line up the intersecting points on to the other units that are in there too. So, but you're cutting a lot of this stuff on the bias, a lot of triangles. So there's going to be stretch, and you don't want to stretch too much. So be very accurate in your cutting too, like very accurate. Check all the pieces. That's what I am learning from this pattern right now. What about you, Stephanie? Any other things you can say about it?
No, pretty much the same. And, Stephen and I quilt a lot, and we're pretty precise quilters, both of us. So the fact that we're running into these little things, don't feel bad at home if yours aren't coming out perfect, because neither are ours. So, but that's okay. I still think at the end, as long as your end product, your end blocks, whether you're making, well, if you're only making one, you don't have to worry about that much. But if you're going to make a table runner or a whole quilt like we are, as long as your blocks all come out at the end, you square them up to the same size, it's not going to matter if there's, not exactly the size that is in the book. So
and I'm
okay already, not being perfect.
I'm already running into the problem. My two blocks I have up there, they're supposed to measure, according to Doug Lico, 20.5 inches. Mine are 20 inches. So I am out by 1/2 an inch. And like I said, when I started making these, I didn't really double check what he said the measurement should be. I was out maybe by 1/8 of an inch, but it compounded. Am I worried about that? No, because they'll fit together. They're coming out the same. So I don't care if they're 20.5 or 20 inches, it'll all work out the same. But just beware of that. It annoys me because I'm a perfectionist and I want to know why mine aren't coming out the way he says they're supposed to. So
exactly, that's my issue too. Mine came out the right size, but definitely when I sew them together, I mean, I have to be really careful, probably use a scant quarter, which you guys know how much I hate that word, scant.
Me too.
To make sure I don't lose my points when I put my blocks together. So Yeah, so don't try to be perfect with this block because I don't know how you could make this perfect.
No, we've been going through everything to figure
Yeah,
it out so we could tell you guys what you should do. And well, you've heard what we've said. So that's all we've come up with. Okay.
yeah.
So yeah, don't worry if it's not absolutely perfect. Big word of the day for this is fudge it.
Let
Just
it go.
fudge it. Let
That's a
it
good
go.
word.
Let
Yeah.
it go. You'll make it work. Make it bend to your will. Okay. Having said all of that, I'm
Yep.
going to over to my cutting mat and we're going to talk about steps 2 and 3. In steps 2 and 3, here in the book, we're talking about this step right here with the square in a square. And then, of course, step 3, which makes this big block, which is the centerpiece of the whole block when you're finished. So the pattern does say you're going to need one F piece. So there's my F and piece, which is 4 inches by 4 inches. And then you need 4 of these triangles, which are G. And then you need 4 more triangles, which are K. Doug Lico does love his triangles. That's this. And we're going to give you 2 methods for lining this up, because what you're supposed to do is you take your G triangles and you're going to attach them. Oops, I got 2 pieces there. You're going to be attaching them to the edges of the square F. But you'll want to center these. So I have a method I use for centering them. Get them up the shot here a little bit more. Sorry about that.
It's all right. Oh, there you go. We can see it good now.
Okay, so that. So Stephanie, why don't you tell people what you do to get things centered?
Sure. Yeah, Stephen and I were talking about this before we started, how we make sure that the triangles are centered on the square. So we do different things. What I do is I like to take my square here and I just fold it in half and then score it just with my fingernail. If you don't have fingernails, you can use one of those hair markers or scoring tools or anything. Then I take my triangle and be careful with your triangles because like Stephen said, these are cut, on the bias. And I fold it in half, right sides together, and then I score that in the center as well. So then those, if you lay one on top of the other, you've got 2 creases that should just sit right on top of each other. So then I'll take that and you guys know I'm not a pinner, but this is one instance where I will pin. And I'll pin right through where those are sitting on top of each other. And then they're perfectly centered. So that's how I find the centers. So just like that. And then I'll sew 1/4 inch down there and then do the same process for all 4 sides.
So I was doing it that way to start with, but then when I ran into this little problem where things were out a little bit, I thought maybe my fabric is sliding. This is batiks, and batiks are slippery on your needle. So I thought I'll be a little bit more accurate with that. And so what I did was I did do what Stephanie said. I folded my piece in half one way, scored it, did it the other way, scored it. But I took a chalk marker and I marked, and you probably can't see this on camera, but I have a little white mark up here, one here, and here. In other words, in the center of each side, I have a little white mark. And on the triangles, I did the same thing. I folded them in half, but then I put a little mark up here at the top, and I just line up those 2 marks along the edge. And I kind of also look at the point to see if it comes down and matches up with the part down here that I marked as the center of that side. And then I clip mine. And I put 3 clips in. You might think that's overkill, but I find that helps. And that's what I did with all of the pieces. So what we're going to do now is we're going to sew these pieces to this square.
And also I found with better results for the square to square is you might be tempted to just kind of go around like clockwise or counterclockwise around your square. But I think it's better to do opposite sides. So do your right and left or top and bottom first, and then do the opposite. So I
I
think they come
agree.
out a little better that way.
And what I do is I do the two opposite sides. I clip them both down and then take that whole thing to my sewing machine. And
Mhm.
mainly because I don't want to have to get up and down 1,000.
And we are going to be trimming this one down to the size listed. I think it's 5.5 inches square. So you may want to try a scant 1/4 inch on this, since we are going to trim it down. If that's if your pieces are coming out too small.
Yeah.
Mine were coming out correct with a 1/4 inch, but that's just another tip if yours are coming out too small.
Yeah, mine were pretty much coming out okay too as well.
Mhm.
Okay, so once you've got the two opposite sides sewn on, you want to take it over and press it at this point and press
Mhm.
it away from each seam, away from the center block. Now, Stephanie, I have a question for you about
Mhm.
this. Once you've got them pressed, as I have right here, do you trim off the dog ears at this point, or do you leave them and just go ahead and put the next piece on?
I leave them because I feel like that's an extra step we don't need to do right now since we're going to trim down the whole block.
Okay, good, because that's what I do too. I
Yeah,
guess if you're not comfortable with that, you could trim it.
you could trim it. Yeah, if you don't like them there, that's fine. They
Yeah,
will get cut off though once we trim the whole block, but it just why make extra work if you don't need to?
exactly. This block's already extra work as far as I'm concerned,
Right?
but I'm determined. We are going to make it work. I will make it work.
And I did use my magic juice or acorn precision piecing just to get these blocks nice and flat. So there's so many seams just to make sure it's
Now, I have a confession
100%.
about that. I should be doing that. I have a tendency to forget. And I did, though, use the acorn pressing solution when I was running into a problem with the unit C from step one. And I decided to try using the acorn for the pieces before I laid them out and sewed them all together. And
Hmm.
I have to say that did help. That did help. Was because it made the fabric a little bit stiffer and a little bit easier to work with.
Hmm.
But I actually have not been using it on the each unit after I get it together. So maybe I should. Of course, now I'm afraid that if
Of
I
course,
do,
I'm a magic juice nut though, so I don't expect everybody else to be.
well, I'm afraid now if I do that, then when I get to putting the final block together, it is going to come out to 20 and a half, whereas the other two are 20. Of course, I can trim them, I suppose, but you don't have a lot there to trim off. So there are no quilt police.
That's right.
Now, this piece is supposed to measure, what's it supposed to be? 5.5. So I'm just going to measure here on my mat. Now, interesting. Mine is 1/8 of an inch over. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim mine. And I'm just going to take 1/8 off. I'm going to make sure I'm putting the 1/4 inch mark on my ruler at the point of this square inside the square, so I don't cut off my point. And that looks like about 1/8 of an inch. And I'll need to do the same thing on all sides. So here we go. And oh, the heck. This comes out to what it should come out. I mean, the camera shot here. My arm's in the way.
So if you guys are, mine's a little bit big. If you find yours is a little bit big, the center point is 2 3/4 inches. So I'm finding the center of this block at 2 3/4 inches.
And that is probably the better way to do it than the way I'm doing it, but mine worked out. The method that I used, it worked out okay, but Stephanie's is the more reliable method. I'm just getting lucky. So yeah, I now have, my square is now 5.5 inches. And I've got, I won't cut off any of my points on here.
All right. So
So
there's the center done. Yay, pretty.
So now our next stage is to add the triangles that are the K ones. They're bigger. And the same method. Now, I don't even bother though doing the folder marking these because we have some points of reference. Because we have these points are in the center.
Yes.
This, all you need to do is line it up with the edge and the point of your triangle. Just make sure it's lined up with the point at the bottom. You can just eyeball it.
Yep. That is correct.
Yeah.
I do the same thing on these ones because you've already got, like you said, the points right here that you can just check and make sure that that triangle is across from.
Yeah. And just like I did on the other one, I'm doing the opposite sides. Excuse me, I think I'm breathing in thread. Residue COVID cough.
Still hanging on, huh?
Yeah, it doesn't want to leave me. But I
Yeah.
don't know, it could be a combination of that. It could be allergies. It could be pollen. There's a lot of it here on our property because the pine trees we have out there, they just spew forth this yellow crap on everything.
Yeah, we've got some wicked pollen down here right now.
I've
had a bunch of people ask me if I'm getting sick, and I'm like, no, it's just pollen.
Yeah, I didn't used to. When I was a kid, I didn't have allergies or anything. I'm still not, I've never been tested. So I'm calling it probably an allergic reaction. But it seems in the last few years, must come with old age or something. I seem to be more susceptible to whatever's in the air.
Yeah.
Press it. And add the other two pieces. And again, I'm not cutting off my dog ears from those first two large triangles. They'll get.
Yeah, me neither.
I'm just doing the same thing, just lining up the point of the triangle with the center part of that square that's already there. This step goes together pretty fast. I know that you are not a pinner, that you do not like using pins, but how do you feel about wonder clips?
I like Wonder Clips. Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. I love wonder clips.
Yeah. I just don't like pins because I don't like to get blood on my fabric.
Yeah, yeah.
I tend to bloodlet myself for some reason.
Yeah, I always run my hand across it and the pin's going the opposite
Yes.
way, and I always stab myself.
Yes. But yeah, I like Wonder Clips definitely, especially for binding.
Oh yeah. I know people for binding are into the gluing it down and basting it down, all kinds of things. I mean, yeah, using the Wonder Clips might take a little bit of time,
Mhm.
but I prefer it. They hold very well.
But some of those other things take quite a bit of time too, because I was taught before this whole gluing thing became the sensation to use Wonder Tape,
Oh yeah,
which is very similar to that Steam a Seam.
machine. Yeah,
Yeah. And it took just as long as actually longer because you had to adhere it and then flip the binding and then stick the binding down and then iron all the way around. Like it took a long time to do that.
yeah.
And now I don't know if it's just I just don't care that much to take that much time, but now I'm just like, whatever. I just clip it with the Wonder Clips. And
Now,
I've tried the Elmer's glue thing too that everybody does
yeah,
now. And that works, but again, it's just a time step that I just don't want to do. Maybe I'm
yeah,
being lazy.
yeah. I agree. I have not tried the glue. I'm being stubborn. I like the Wonder Clip method. It's working for me fine, and
Yeah.
so I don't worry too much about it.
Hey, if you what you're doing is working, then why change it?
I change it, yeah. So I just trimmed my block down now. And what I did was the same thing I did with the other one. This worked out to about 8 inches, and it's supposed to be 7.5. But I've taken a 1/4 inch off all the way around, a 1/4 inch from the point that's here. And so now the moment of truth, 7.5, 7.5. Yeah, that one works out fine. That is good. How are you coming?
I am trimming mine now. I'm trying to find the center. So again, you're going to need, if you're doing it this way, 3.75 to find the center. Mine is also large. It's like, I think 8 inches.
Yep, that's what mine came out to as well. And he doesn't really tell you how to trim. He assumes you know. So, you saw how I do it. You see how Stephanie does it. So there's two techniques there. If you've got one that works for you that's different from ours, feel free to go for it.
Yep. I'm just going slow, taking my time because I don't want to cut it wrong because I don't have to make this again.
Yeah, exactly. I am just grabbing my portable design board and I'm laying out for the next step. Now, this is something I'll wait till you're ready for this, Stephanie, because I have something else I want to talk about next.
Sure. So if you just do this one side at a time, it's a little easier than trying to measure the whole square as well. So I did one side and then I flipped around and put it right on that 7.5 inch mark.
Yeah.
So just FYI. That way you only have to find 3.75 once. All right, there is mine done.
Okay.
And let me grab all my pieces here. So this is where you're going to need your pieces that we made last week.
Your unit C.
Mm-hmm. And then the square that we used in the middle of our square to square, the very center, you should have cut 5 of those. One was for the center of the square and the square, and the other 4 are for the corners of this unit.
Now, here's where you're all going to look at the screen and you're going to scream at me. Because this is where the fudging comes in. This square in the center is exactly what he says it's supposed to be. It is 7.5 inches square. So each one of these sides is 7.5 inches. Now, these pieces, unit C, are supposed to be 7.5 inches as well. And they are, but here's the mystery. Why, when I lay it down next to the edge, I have not enough in this. I'm off by about an eighth of an inch
Huh.
on it. I don't understand why. I mean, I took math. If this edge is 7.5 inches and this edge is 7.5 inches, why don't they match? Edge to edge. So you know what I do, and this is where you're all going to scream at the screen. I stretch. I pull
Okay.
evenly, and I just pull it. And sometimes I add a little steam to the pull to get it. And it won't. There's not enough for me to really stretch it so it's going to match, but it comes closer. And I don't want to distort my pieces, but that's a possibility. Do that, and then when I sew these together, I will do. I'm not sure what the technical term for it is, but I kind of pull it and a little bit to get the edges to match up, and
Okay.
and it seems to be working. But if you do that too much, you're going to stretch stuff, and then you're going to have puckers. So,
Yeah.
but I don't know why it doesn't. It just
If you
possible.
have a situation like that, like Stephen was talking about as well, the fabric that is a little slightly bigger, they always recommend to put that on the bottom, the one that's going to touch your feed dogs, and put the smaller piece on top too. That'll help with you to kind of zhuzh that piece in a little bit.
So, okay, run that. This one, I've heard this many times before, and I
Mhm.
always forget. If
Sure.
you put your smaller piece on the bottom,
No, on the top.
on the top, okay.
Mhm.
All right. Yeah.
You want to put your larger piece on the bottom, let the feed dogs pull on the larger piece, and put the smaller piece on top because a little bit of that pull sometimes will move the fabric just enough and help you get that top piece on. And also that way, if you get near the end and you see it's going to be just a smidgen off, you can give it that last little pull on the top as it goes through, and
And
it should match up.
that's something that I've been doing unconsciously. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know why. Well, not unconsciously. I've heard about it. So I've got mine all laid out here. I put them on my little portable design board, and I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine. I'm going to sew them row by row across. I'm going to press my seams for the top row, row number one. I'm going to press my seams to the left. On the row in the middle, I'm going to press them to the right. And in the bottom row, I'm going to press to the left so that when I put the rows together, my seams are going to interlock. Now, if you don't like starting with the left, you like going from the right, you can do that. But you want your one seam, and everybody knows this, but so I don't probably need to say it. I'm saying it more for myself than anybody else. Um, you want them to interlock.
Yes.
It's going to keep things more accurate, and it's going to keep your intersections nice and lined up.
And also, as you sew these, make sure you open your pieces up and make sure you didn't lose your point.
Yes.
And if you are losing your points, then go for a more scant 1/4 inch.
Yeah. Nothing annoys me more than if I lose a point.
Yeah.
When I first started quilting, I didn't care about that. It just happened, and I thought, well, okay, it's a customization, but no, it drives me nuts. There's nothing more satisfying I find in quilting is when you open up a
Yeah, I
piece.
look back at some of my first quilts that they were like that, and I was like, oh, what was I doing?
I love the feeling when I open it up and go, oh, I can see my point. That's so nice. It's amazing the things that give you a thrill in quilting. I also like to use my stiletto when I'm doing these kind of things, just so I can keep my fingers away from the needle.
Mhm.
And if I have to do a little fudging to get things to fit, stiletto really does help.
It does.
So, and I like to finger press the seams in the direction that I'm going to press them in. So at the time of us recording this, we had to change our schedule. Stephanie had a little problem with her internet. So
Yeah.
what that happened?
What's that?
What was it that happened? Like,
Oh, they're building new townhomes in my development, and we have Spectrum internet. I don't think they have that in Canada, but anybody that has Spectrum in the United States know that they're not the greatest. They're kind of cruddy, and they came out to uh, work on the new homes, and they cut through the line.
oh, how wonderful.
What's that?
Yeah. We had a similar situation. It didn't affect us, but on last week, they were constructing or reconstructing a bridge that goes over one of the highways at the south end of our city, and they cut through all the fiber opticals.
Oh,
All the businesses down in that end, which include my local quilt store, were without internet or telephone service, and they were telling them it was going to be a good 5 to 6 days before it was going to come back.
Oh my goodness.
And
That paralyzes a business.
well, yeah, exactly. But luckily, we were in on the weekend. After we'd gone to the quilt show, we dropped into Ultimate Sewing, and they were back up. They had just gotten back up about an hour before we got there. So it wasn't as long as the company was saying. But
Yeah.
wonder what your recourse is as a company. You're losing business because of no
Yeah.
recourse. I mean, I wonder if there's any kind of compensation. Probably not, because the internet provider, which would be Bell Canada, that had the fiber optical in, or it could have been the other one. It might have been Rogers too. I don't know. We have only the two. They won't give any compensation to the businesses because they'll say it wasn't their fault. It was the fault of the contractor, the third party contractors, and the third party contractor is going to say, well, it wasn't our fault because the locate wasn't proper. So we didn't know there was cables there, but I don't know. It'll be one person blaming another. So I guess
That's usually how it goes, right?
yeah. But I do feel sorry for businesses like something like the quilt store. They're small business, and
Yep.
they can't really afford not to have any sales for 5 days.
Right.
One thing you can do if you're afraid you're going to cut off your points is when you put your fabric in underneath your sewing machine needle, put it so you can see the intersecting seam lines of your point, and so just above that intersection point by about a hair, and you're usually good. Okay, now I've got to press these rows, and I can put the rows together for the block.
So did you get to see any of the Northern Lights?
Nope. It was we forgot all about it the first night. The second night it was just way too cloudy. You couldn't see it.
Yeah.
Plus, where we live, there is a Boy Scout camp kind of thing right behind us, the forest, and they have lodges in there too, and they have a lot of lights, so there's a lot of light pollution.
Oh, gotcha.
So even if it hadn't been cloudy, we would have probably had to have gone, like, driven someplace else to see what was happening. Okay, so you can't see it because I don't have a camera on my pressing mat here, but I have got the 3 rows pieces all together into strips, and now I'm lining up my first row. I've got it so my seams interlock, and I'm matching up the intersections. Now I have a little problem. This one piece, the intersections, it's a little off inside. So what am I doing? I am fudging it. What do I mean by fudging it? I don't know. I'm just going to make it work. So it does involve a little bit of little tugging, little pulling, a little persuasion. That's what I'm going to call it.
There you go. I like that persuasion.
Yeah, persuade the fabric to do what I want it to do.
Yeah, I like that. We're going to use that from now on. We're persuading this piece.
We're persuading the fabric to agree with us. And I'm just praying that when I get this together, I'm very, very close to what he said it should be. Now I don't remember, did he say to press each row towards the center or outwards from the center square? I'm pressing them outwards.
I'm pressing mine out, yeah.
Because it just seems to be the natural.
It seems like sometimes if you like just look at the way the fabric wants to go, it seems to want to lay that way.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Now, the fun thing here now is the bottom strip that I'm putting on here, my intersections match right up without having to do any persuading.
Well, that's good.
So what's that all about? What have I done wrong?
Even though they were done exactly the same.
But I'm making it work.
Go. We're definitely going with finish is better than perfect in this case.
Yeah. Yeah, these are not being entered into a quilt show.
No. You know what though? The more and more shows that I enter and the more strange comments that I see on people's quilts or even my own that from judges, I go, I don't think it even matters because
Yeah.
It really seems to be going the way of subjective, pretty much what the judge likes and doesn't like. There was a quilt in the show that I was just in that got first place, and my uncle, who is not a quilter, my aunt is a quilter, and she got a second place ribbon on her quilt, but hers was in a different category as this other one. But this other one that got first place, my uncle walks up to it and he goes, "Oh, none of their points are match up." And he's not a quilter, and he saw that right away, and it still got a first place ribbon.
Yeah, so there you go, right?
So, yeah. All right, there it is.
You got yours. Yours is done too. Yep, great. So there it is. And guess what? This measures exactly 14.5 inches on all sides.
Perfect. I was just going to measure mine. 14.5 that way. And let's see the other way. 14.5, bang on. Yay.
So that's a good thing. I mean, there was some fudging involved, but
but we know this section is the right size.
so that's okay. So that was step 3 and 4. So that means the next time you see us, we'll be working on steps. Is that 3 and 4? No, that was 2 and 3. Sorry, 2 and 3.
Yeah,
next time we'll be working on steps 4 and 5. And 4 and 5 just as a preview to this. Very simple four. It's a 4-patch.
Mm-hmm.
And those seem to go together very nicely. And step 5 is just putting more triangles. This pattern didn't really as it has a lot of triangles.
He likes his triangles.
But those go together pretty quickly too.
Mm-hmm.
And with not a lot of fuss. I didn't have a lot of problems with step 4 or step 5. So that will be next time. And we're getting closer to getting the block finished. So I'm just going to go over here to my seat. And
so personally, I don't know about Stephen, but I think step 6 and step 7, which is not next time, but the following, are the ones that are the trickiest ones. So
yeah, in terms of what they're going to measure to, trimming them up. But we'll talk about that when we get there. So, I mean, if you're working ahead, good luck with it. Maybe you have some tips and tricks you have found along the way as well. If you have or whatever, feel free to share it in the comments below, and we'll take a look at those. And maybe you will have taught us something that we didn't know. And in this case, there's a lot I don't know. So I am the idiot quilter. So any parting words, Stephanie, anything you want to say about?
No, thanks for sewing with me again. That was fun. I'm glad that they came out to the right size because like I said, as Steve and I were talking about this before we started, I didn't measure the first time that centerpiece. So
yeah, me either. So I'm very happy that it worked out fine. So good. Anyways, okay, everybody. Well, carry on with yours, and we'll see you probably in a week's time for the next stage of this. So bye, everybody.